So he discovered his secret of invisibility while working on a series of tests involving an obscure drug.
Okay.
It later talks about which obscure drug.
Okay. Ozempic.
And another drug.
Is that why we can't see people on Ozempic?
They're withering away.
They're invisible.
I'm seeing less and less of them every week.
Welcome.
Oh, here we go.
Welcome to the Low Grade Research Podcast.
Is this job... Do you guys still have scooters on your floors?
We don't, but we have there's a bunch of scooters there and nobody rides them anymore.
Interesting.
We've become too serious. But you go onto the first floor and there's this back room that's just open to everybody and there's probably 35 scooters in there. Little electric scooters.
Just all charged and ready to go?
The last time I rode one, it was probably a fourth of them worked. And out of that fourth, half of them worked well.
I think if you ever, the next time you do performance reviews, that's how you show up to their desk.
Well, my boss lives in a different state. I can't even do that.
I mean, when you're giving a performance review to the people under you.
Okay, well,
that's
also not a reality of my job, but I could get on a video call with my boss and then roll in on a motor scooter.
I like that.
That brings a certain kind of energy.
Time to see if you get to keep your job.
Actually, the amount of times I've seen dudes just completely eat it on those things in the offices, including myself. I had a bruise the size of a grapefruit on my knee for weeks.
If you could get the video footage of that on the security cameras.
No. I'm never going to look for it. But
just of anybody.
Oh, we probably have some somewhere. When I crashed bad, this is the third year I've worked there. I've ridden these scooters plenty. And then there's these newer dudes. And they're like, yeah, you ever ridden one of these things? I was like, oh, no, never. Can I try it? And I was pretending to do it badly. And then I lost my balance and went full speed right into a desk. Oh. Completely ate it. Yard sale all over the ground. I know
how to ride these.
Yeah, it was terrible.
That's hilarious.
And then I had a big old bruise. So.
Too good.
Wear your helmets, kids.
Wear your helmets to work. Mm-hmm. And to school, essentially.
Yeah, just carry one with you at all times, just in case you're going to need it. Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, well, we're going to get into it anyways.
All right.
So the monster we're talking about today is the Invisible Man.
Ooh.
Yes.
Kind of I guess maybe we'll see at the end, but I've always pictured him as kind of an underappreciated monster.
Totally. And this one, out of all the monsters that we're doing in this series, this is the one that's not really like a monster in the sense that you would think.
Okay.
Which you've seen. Have you seen this movie? I can't remember if you said you've seen it. It's an old one.
I'm not sure that I have, actually. I think when I think about it, I'm thinking of the one in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Sure. He gets a brief mention in this.
Ooh.
He does. Very brief.
Because he's very pervy in that movie?
He is very pervy.
He's the worst version of what that guy would be.
No, he's really not. Well, which is worse, being a perv or being a murderer?
Actually, have you ever seen the show The Boys on Amazon? Superhero movie?
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Don't watch it. It's so depressing. It's like the superheroes have none of the morals or ethics that we wish that they would, and they're just as bad and politically maneuvering and underhanded as anybody else would be.
Yeah.
But one of the dudes can go invisible, and I only watched 3 episodes, so maybe it gets better. But he spends a ton of his time just hanging out in women's locker rooms and stuff, and like the 17-year-old boy version of what you would think this would be. You know? Terrible.
No, totally.
So when I say that the Invisible Man in League could be worse, I guess that's probably true.
It could be worse. Could be better. But anyway, so this is the one monster that's just a dude that had something happen to him, if that makes sense. We talked about.
Like Guy Fieri?
Exactly like Guy Fieri.
He's just walking down a New York street, bam, gets slapped by a hamburger.
You like pizza?
His whole life blossoms before his eyes.
So this movie was released in 1933.
Okay. Oldie but a goodie.
Very oldie, but still very relevant.
Boy, that's even older than Because Creature from the Black Lagoon was 54.
That's right.
Yeah. Maybe
So
we
this
should have
was-
done these in order of release.
Oh, we should have thought
Missed
about
opportunity.
that.
Dang
So
it.
this was one of the first that they released. I think this was the second, because originally they had planned on releasing this. I wrote it down, so I need to look. They wanted. Oh, it was. I remember now. Universal Studios originally had released Dracula as kind of one of their first monster movies.
Okay.
And it was a huge success. It was received super well.
Sure.
And so as their follow-up, they originally had The Invisible Man planned as their next one. But they ended up going with Frankenstein.
Oh, interesting.
So they actually, and that was like 1931 when Frankenstein was released. So they'd actually already started, not production, but kind of some of the writing and development for The Invisible Man started 2 years early.
Sure.
Yeah. But it wasn't actually made till 1933.
Wow.
Look
okay.
how quick I got back on track.
That
on
was pretty
one.
good, actually. Yep.
So anyway, any questions there?
No, sorry.
Okay, good.
No rude comments either.
So this movie was directed by James Whale,
Okay.
who also directed Frankenstein. Well, there was kind of a 7-year period where a lot of movies were being a lot of horror type movies were being released by Universal Studios, and he was credited with directing 4 of them. So he
Holy
included
smokes.
Frankenstein, the Old Dark House, The Bride of Frankenstein,
Okay.
and then The Invisible Man.
That's
So-
pretty good pedigree.
Yeah, great pedigree.
Pedigree. All right. Did he go on to do anything else that we would know?
Those were kind of the main ones. He did do other stuff, but this is kind of what he's mostly known for as far as the horror genre of Universal.
That was also 33, so this dude's been passed away for a long time now.
He
no
has,
doubt,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, and then this movie starred Claude Rains as the Invisible Man,
Of course.
and his
Arguably a
counterpart-
role you don't really need anybody important for.
Oddly enough, though, so kind of a cool piece of trivia. So he played the Invisible Man.
Okay.
Years later, like in the 50s, he took his, at the time, 12-year-old daughter to go see it because it was being re-released in theaters.
Okay.
And it was wintertime, and so he actually kind of bundled himself up and wrapped himself up so you couldn't really see who he was.
Yeah.
Because at that point, he'd done some other movies and was like a fairly famous actor. But he was all bundled up,
Sure.
goes to the ticket counter, didn't want any special treatment, and asks for 2 tickets.
Yep.
But the girl that was working the ticket counter recognized his voice because she didn't have to put a face to it because he was the Invisible Man.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, "You're Claude Rains," and he's like, "No, I'm not."
Shut up.
And so she's like, "Yes, you are."
Shut up and give me that Dune popcorn bucket.
"Yes, you're Claude Rains. I recognize the lack of face." But he was like, "I don't want any special treatment. I'd like to purchase our tickets just like everyone else." And then
Just like a normie.
And then they went to the theater with his daughter and watched the movie together.
That's pretty cool.
And then actually, I do remember this too. He started telling his daughter kind of like all the ins and outs of the movie. Because at this point, this was like a, 15-year-old movie or something.
Sure.
And so most people had seen it, but they were re-releasing it. And so in the theater, he was telling his daughter, "Oh, this is how we did this, and this is what happened here."
Okay.
And everyone in the audience recognized, "Oh, that's the guy that's on the screen right now. Let's listen to what he's got to say." So
Sure.
instead of watching the movie, they just listened to him describe scene by scene what was going on and
Oh,
how
how
they did
cool is
certain
that?
stuff. Super cool, right?
Yeah. That's the only time in a movie theater where I would be cool with somebody talking through it.
Yeah, if the star of the movie was
Yeah.
sitting middle row.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, super cool.
Nice.
Little fact on that about Claude Rains. All right, okay, so let's talk about where this idea for the movie and the monster came from.
Okay.
So most of what I'm going to present today bases itself around the movie, since we're kind of focused on what Universal has done with the monster.
Sure.
So they didn't come up with the monster themselves, but the movie was inspired by a book written by H.G. Wells
Okay.
that was published in 1897.
Sure.
So, 36 years?
I've read part of that book.
Have you?
Only the beginning.
Sure.
Yeah.
Books are tough.
They are tough.
If you know me, books are tough. Anyway.
Moving on.
So, let's see. So yeah, based on the book by H.G. Wells. So originally H.G. Wells had started writing this book as kind of like a mini series.
Okay.
That was published in a weekly. Hold on, let me say that again. So it was published in a publication called Pearson's Weekly, which is like a London-based weekly article that comes out. So he started writing it as like a little mini series, but then he realized this is a great story. Like, let's write a whole book. So he did. So, and then later that year, he finished it, and it was released as a whole story.
Wow.
So the story centers around a man named Griffin. In the book, he's just referred to as Griffin, as kind of like his surname.
Sure.
And he's a medical student who's studying optical density, which is actually kind of a real thing. So he believes that he's on the verge of this huge discovery. He's dating this woman whose father is kind of his... Wait, I have two stories kind of mixed up, so bear with me, because the book says one thing, then the movie, they took a slightly different route.
Okay.
So, let me forget the girl. She's not involved yet.
I've already forgotten her.
Good.
We hardly knew anything about her.
We hardly knew her. So, in the book, Griffin, his kind of professor that's taken him under his wing, is notoriously known for crediting himself for other people's work.
Oh, so every professor you've ever had.
Exactly. School's a sham, kids. So Griffin knows he's on the verge of this huge discovery.
Yep.
Decides to start working on it by himself.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Exactly. So in order to fund his own experiments, he has to steal money from his father.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
How much money?
It wasn't it's in the book, but from the research I did.
Take a shot in the dark. How much money do you think, knowing what the experiment is, how much money do you think it would take from
enough,
1930s?
It does say enough so that his father committed suicide when he saw he lost all that money.
Oh, no.
So it was a lot of money.
That's like, well.
It's like his life savings.
Not a great time to joke. Continue.
Yeah.
Terrible. That's a terrible part of the story.
Yes. This isn't a happy story.
No, well, it doesn't seem like it so far.
No version of it is a happy story.
So it's like, what, $10?
15.
1930s money?
It was, well,
gosh,
the,
that actually
the book was
close.
1890s.
Oh, when my house was built.
That's crazy to think about, actually. Your house is older than this book.
I lay awake a lot at night thinking about how old that house is, how many people have died in there. I wish that was a joke.
How many wars that house has seen.
Anyway.
Okay. So through his experiments, he discovers a way to basically refract light and change its direction off of his cells to become invisible.
Wow.
You know, and that's the fiction part of this story.
Okay.
So anyway, so the background, let's talk about...
you said optical density was a real thing?
It is. Well, it's not like a real, like, it's kind of a subfield of optics type of thing. Let me see if I still have that piece pulled up.
It's cool to see that, like, still exists, though, because from the 1930s, it's like they had all kinds of crazy names for everything that don't really survive now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
optical density is also kind of called absorbance, as far as absorbing light and things. So it's defined as the logarithm of the ratio of incident to transmitted radiant power through a sample.
Okay.
So how much is hitting, for example, your eye, and how much is actually going through it.
Sure.
So, and that's kind of...
What a crazy thing to measure.
Really crazy. And also kind of cool that he thought about this back then. Like, I bet I could use this to write this story about how the scientist makes himself invisible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. So anyway, let's talk about H.G. Wells for a second.
Let's do it.
So,
the master.
He was good. I don't know if he was a master.
Well, he's got a lot of good old stories.
He does. He's actually... So, the article talks about him and a few other really well-known authors of the time, including Arthur Conan Doyle, Robert Louis Stevenson, Rudyard Kipling. Man, words are tough today. Anyway, Arthur Conan Doyle is known for the Sherlock Holmes series. Robert Louis Stevenson did Treasure Island. Rudyard Kipling.
The Bible.
Yes.
Yep.
So all of these guys, journalists have kind of said that all of these guys basically wrote boys' books for grown-ups.
Okay.
They were just really great fiction writers, but catering it to an older audience.
Sure, okay.
Which, especially for the time, was kind of like, all right, like we've got something a little more entertaining.
Yeah.
You know?
Instead of just like watching the sun go down and eating stew cold.
Instead of just reading the Bible.
Counting the days until your kid comes back from the mine.
Yeah. So anyway, so Wells says that his inspiration for this novel actually came from a little short story poem thing.
Okay.
Well, it was a short story / poem called The Perils of Invisibility.
Okay.
So, which is from a series of light verse poetry from a series called the Bab Ballads. Bab Ballads.
I've done a little bit of light verse poetry
Gilbert.
in my day.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Let's hear one.
Well, I don't have it on hand. I recorded it many years ago. But you've got my album. The only one I've ever produced.
I have heard some light verse poetry.
It's pretty good. And nobody has listened to the entirety of that yet. You know how I know?
Because there's a key piece.
Because there were hidden messages in there.
Oh.
So I gave out 6 of those CDs. And in the past 4 years, nobody's ever bothered to listen to the whole thing.
Nobody's got a CD player anymore.
That's not my problem.
Ugh. Okay.
Go to Savers.
We digress. So in this book, let's talk about the Bab Ballads.
Okay.
So a man named W.S. Gilbert wrote this collection of short poems and stories in which his humor, they're kind of like...
the Bab Ballads?
B-A-B Ballads. Yeah, Bab Ballads.
Okay.
So little babbling ballads, if you will.
Stories Babs wrote.
Exactly.
Great.
Named
That's a
W.S.
good joke
Gilbert.
by me.
Which I think actually... once his first one kind of hit, he started writing under the surname of Bab. This W.S. Gilbert, who wrote the Bab Ballads.
Okay, good for him.
Anyway, short little tidbit of a fact there. So anyway, they were written in a comedic sense. So he would take some premise.
Wouldn't that be called a shact?
What's that?
Short little fact.
If there's one thing we know about Shaq... He is not a short little fact.
No, it's a shact. It's different. Keep
right.
going with your dumb story.
We're gonna coin that.
And make fun of my joke.
So anyway, he would write these short poems that were, he describes it as, the humor is derived by setting up a ridiculous premise and working out its logical consequences, however absurd.
Okay.
So he wrote this short little poem about a man who...
A show-em, so to speak.
A show-em, if you will. About a man who is upset. He just gets out of a big fight with his wife, and then this fairy appears and grants him 3 wishes. And the options she gives him are like a ton of money.
Sure.
I still have the Bab Ballads pulled up. I actually found the poem itself. And she offers him 3 gifts. The first is unbound riches. The second is health, and the third is invisibility. And without a second thought, he's like, invisibility for sure. He's like, I don't want my wife to see me. Anyway, the absurdity
also,
part of it.
If you're thinking about it, you have unbound riches anyway if you're invisible.
Yeah.
You walk in and out of a bank.
The poem doesn't go that deep into the weeds of it.
Well, I am, and it's terrible.
But basically, he becomes invisible, but while he's talking to this fairy, his wife overhears, and just all she hears is another woman in the other room.
Yikes.
So she's like, who you talking to? This ain't going to fly.
Does the fairy grant invisibility before the wife walks into the room?
She does, yes.
Lucky.
And she also grants it on command. So he has the ability to become visible again when he wishes.
Score.
So his wife, in order to combat that, basically just steals all of his pants and underpants. So if he ever were to become visible again, he'll be naked in public. So he can't go around meeting other women.
Boy, that tracks.
Exactly.
An invisible guy is not going to be able to steal another pair of pants.
I know. Well, he had morals.
Wait, does that mean that the mechanism of this invisibility is that he has to be totally nude for it to work?
For this short story, yes. And also for The Invisible Man.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There you
because just he is invisible, not his clothes.
Sure.
So he read that poem, and instead of the comedic sense that the author was trying to send out, he was like, well, what if people were invisible but didn't have the morality?
Oh.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about Hollow Man in this episode?
There's a brief mention, and we can talk about that for sure.
Okay, good. I'm happy to wait. I just want to make sure we talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Because I'm pretty sure that the line you just said about morality is the tagline for that movie.
Oh, really?
Well, who knows?
Interesting. Well, any chance we get to talk about Kevin Bacon, we're going to take it.
Amen. Kevin Bacon, Nick Cage.
Yeah. So, let's see. So many names and so many people that went by initials and a last name. I don't want to get them confused. All right,
we're going 1930s.
We're going back to H.G. Wells.
Okay.
Who was the author of the book. So his other reference that he says inspired him to write this was actually a document called The Republic, which was written, or excuse me, not necessarily written, but authored by Plato. And in The Republic, it talks about, well, let's see, The Republic is a Socratic. That's the word. It's a Socratic dialogue concerning justice, the order and character of the just city-state and the just man. And in the dialogue, Socrates discusses the meaning of justice and whether the just man is happier than the unjust man with various Athenians and foreigners. So they kind of get into this dialogue of like, who's actually happier? The man who has morals and acts justly, or the man that lives completely freely and in a state of, near anarchy, doing whatever he wants?
What's your take?
I think, if we want to get philosophical here, I think the temptation of living in a state where you can just do whatever you want with zero consequences, I don't think causes someone to be happier. I think we've seen that plenty of times.
Have we, though?
Don't give me that look. Look at San Francisco. Terrible. Anyway, and then there's a second.
I agree, by the way. I think you need a little bit of, you got to have discipline. You got to have the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
Or else you don't know the good and the bad.
There's got to be balance. So then there's actually a second book of the Republic, and it recounts a legend of the Ring of
Power.
Gyges.
Oh.
Close. And it proposes that if a man were made invisible, he could act with impunity. He would go about among men with the powers of a god. Okay. So in this second document, they actually use this example of like, well, if a guy was invisible, would he still do his just duty, or would he go around doing whatever he wanted? Because essentially at that point, you do have the power of a god. No one knows you're there, but you're free to do whatever you want without consequence.
It's a rough question.
It is. So these documents combined with
that's the kind of question
story,
that will never serve you in practicality. It will only serve to diminish you in the eyes of other people. So,
fair enough.
Got to watch out for those, folks.
So those two things are the inspiration for H.G. Wells writing this story. So
nice.
So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we're gonna jump back a little bit to the movie adaptation. I take that back. We're going to talk about the books. I kind of mentioned previously the book's method of invisibility.
Okay.
And it talked about, and it basically involves changing the body's refractive index to that of air so that it is neither absorbed nor reflects light. That's kind of the premise set up in the book as to how he's able to become invisible.
Sure.
And then in the movie,
I said sure pretty quick, and then I thought about that for a second. So you said that
it's pretty heavy.
He sets up the density of his body so it matches air, so it neither absorbs or reflects light. Is that what you said?
Just the refraction, its refractive ability. So not the density, but its refraction.
Okay.
So similar. So air exists. We can't see it, but we know it's there. And how light, if we could see it, then it would block light from reaching us, right?
Sure.
Essentially. So through his experiments and drugs ingested, he was able to change his body's...
I knew it was in there somewhere.
Oh, it's in there. Yep. It's in there. More so in the movie, but in the book, it's like, there may have been some drugs.
Sure.
I mean, it was the 30s. People were learning about drugs.
I mean, yeah, you could like just roll around and get laudanum from the corner store, probably.
Isn't that when cocaine was still in Coca-Cola?
I think since neither of us are going to look it up, we can confidently say yes.
Perfect.
Yep.
In the movie...
That was a shact, by the way.
Another shact for you guys. You know what? Why don't you write us in and tell us your favorite shact? A short, little fact.
If it's about Shaquille O'Neal, don't bother.
Don't bother. Anyway, that's at hello@otherbrothers.studio.
Yep.
So in the movie, Dr. Griffin... In the movie, he goes by Dr. Jack Griffin, whereas in the book, he's just called Griffin.
Okay.
But they decided to give him a full name and character for the movie. So he discovered his secret of invisibility while working on a series of tests involving an obscure drug.
Okay.
It later talks about which obscure drug.
Okay. Ozempic.
And another drug. And another drug.
Is that why we can't see people on Ozempic?
They're withering away.
They're invisible.
I'm seeing less and less of them every week. Oh, so the other drug is called monocaine, which is kind of a real drug.
Okay.
Kind of not. It sounds like they just kind of took something that was real and then changed it.
How dare Hollywood do that?
How dare they? Any guesses on what the other drug was he mixed to make this concoction?
Monocaine? Is it anything like the name? Would I guess it from the name?
No.
Oh, fentanyl, for sure.
Oh, pretty close. Opium. Wow.
Yeah, well.
Not bad.
I know my 1930s. 1890s.
So the combination of opium and monocaine caused his blood to boil, and then he would process his body in a radiator engine.
What?
Yeah, so you got to watch the movie.
Do you know what that does? Does it depict that? What's a radiator engine?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
no.
You don't know.
No idea.
Did you watch the movie?
I did not watch the movie.
Unbelievable.
I watched a few clips.
I didn't watch the one from mine last week either. We probably should watch them.
I saw the one that was like the remake back in 2020.
Okay.
But, they had CGI and
sure.
Some of the science may or may not have checked out. Anyway. So, funnily enough, a Russian writer in the 1960s actually did some research into the book's version of how Griffin turned himself invisible. And he actually was like, so H.G. Wells kind of knew what he was talking about.
Oh, boy.
So there's a little bit of validity to it, but at the same time, a lot of fiction.
Okay.
Because he says...
It's just like my high school degree, baby.
He says that a man made invisible by Griffin's method should have been blind because the human eye works by absorbing incoming light and not letting it through completely.
Sure.
Right? So Wells seemed to show some awareness of this problem because later in the book, there's a cat that he turns invisible to see if it'll work on animals.
Yeah.
And he says the invisible cat retains its retinas. So like the retinas are visible, I guess. Okay. So it's a floating pair of retinas. Weird. And for those that don't know, the retina, that's like, so your eyeball is hollow and filled with fluid.
Yep.
And the retina is that inside layer that is holding that fluid in. And that's where your cones and rods are, your optic nerve comes through there. So that's where all that is. So it's very important.
So it's like the backing of your eye where the light is received after it passes through your pupil.
Totally. But even still, this wouldn't work because the retina would be so full of light from all directions that it couldn't actually focus on a single thing.
Oh, sure.
Because the light's not directed to where it needs to go.
So this is starting to sound like a pretty major curse.
Starting to sound like fiction.
I know, it's funny to me that they talk about the lengths H.G. Wells goes to make sure like
there's like a morsel of validity to it.
He understands the validity of it, and it's like, yeah, the rest of this is perfectly accurate, and we're going to make sure that people know that I know what I'm talking about because this cat's got blue eyes.
Oh. So that's kind of the premise of the story, and
nice.
I don't want to spoil anything, but I think we kind of all know a little bit.
Okay, but spoil it because the movie came out in 1933.
Right. Well, and every adaptation they've ever made of The Invisible Man, he eventually starts to lose his morality and either kills people or starts stealing or something bad
things.
Exactly. So H.G. Wells answers that question from Socrates.
I'm just saying, I think I can confidently say there's not a single person that will listen to this podcast that hasn't also lived their entire life with this movie available for them to go find and watch.
Exactly. So, this is nearly 100-year-old movie.
Yeah, we don't have any 91-year-olds listen to this podcast.
If you haven't seen it right now, sorry to spoil it for you.
Yeah, and if you're 91 and listen to this podcast, congratulations for figuring out how to make it this far. We're really glad you're here.
Congratulations on figuring out podcasts.
Yeah, this is like a major thing for you.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Feel free to, if you can do emails too, write us in and we'll come visit you.
We'll have you on the show.
Well, we'll come visit you.
I'll have you on my show.
Mitch's new show, Oldies and Goldies.
We talk about the golden years with old people. So, anyway, every Invisible Man has turned bad, so don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah, if you have the capability for optical density to change your refraction.
Okay, so now I want to talk about...
Taking a quick break?
I do want to talk about taking a quick break. Let me get some water.
We'll be back right after this. Hey, Mitch.
Hey, what's up?
Are you ignoring the incessant beeping of your smoke detector and blaming it for your failing marriage?
Yeah, but that's just because I took the batteries out for the remote.
Well, for everything, including your marriage, look no further than GHM Handyman work for all your home care needs. From electrical to plumbing, appliance installation, appliance repair, sprinklers, woodwork, and everything in between, no job is too big or too small.
Listen, folks, jokes aside, there are two big problems you'll face when looking for a handyman. The first is the white-hot embarrassment knowing you can't change your smoke alarm battery and your marriage is falling apart. The other thing, and this is a big one, not knowing who to trust. Dear listener, you know us.
We know you.
You listen to the Low Grade Research Podcast for verifiable facts that you can trust. So you can trust us when we say you won't find a more honest, hardworking, and customer-oriented handyman out there. If he can't fix it, he won't sleep until you're happy, or your money back.
So if you live in Utah County, get your free quote today. Call Matthew with GHM Handyman Work at 385-375-4162. That's 385-375-4162.
Mention our podcast for a discount on your next service. GHM Handyman Work, your one-stop shop supplying serious solutions for all your home repair needs. Now we're going to get into some cool, almost trivia stuff, specifically about the movie.
Okay.
Because this was stuff I found interesting. We talked about the monster.
Sure.
We talked about the Invisible Man. We talked about the mistakes he made.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't. He starts killing people. There we go.
How quickly?
Pretty quickly.
He's invisible and he's like, I'll be good. And 3 hours later, he's murdering some guy.
So in the book, like I said, he's strictly a student and doesn't want his professor to take credit. In the movie, he's already a doctor, and the guy he's working for has a daughter whom he is in love with.
Okay.
But he knows he'll never get the approval of her father because he's
only a doctor.
Because he's just a researcher. He's very poor.
Oh.
Doesn't have money, and so he's
that kind of doctor.
Yeah. He's like, I got to get big.
Sure.
So he starts doing all the experiments basically to get rich quick type of deal.
I see.
So, and usually people that are trying to get rich quick have low morals anyway because they'll do anything to get it quick.
This is a long answer for how quickly does he start killing people?
Pretty quickly. Actually, I think in the movie he only kills one person before the town starts coming after him.
Well, that's good on the town.
The town has high morals.
Yeah.
It's a great town.
Begs the question, how does the town know it was him? But that's an invisible joke for all you listeners out there.
Well, the town... Usually the guy that did it is the one that you haven't seen around in a few days because he's left town. In this situation, You still haven't seen him around for a few days, but he hasn't left town.
I saw Griffin screaming from the steps of the Capitol building that he had the power to make himself invisible.
I am God!
Now I haven't seen him for 3 days, and Jerry's dead.
That's the movie in a nutshell.
Griffin screaming that he can make himself invisible and, quote, I'm going to kill Jerry. Now he's dead. Who could have seen this happen?
Okay, so some cool stuff about this. Because I was like, how did they film? This movie was made in 1933. Or released in 1933.
Sure.
No CGI,
Zero
no special
CGI.
effects.
Y2K was years away.
They weren't even worried about it.
Yep. Plenty of calendar left.
So how
to go.
did they film an invisible man without all these technological advances?
Do you want me to answer for real?
Well, I know, and I'm pretty sure you know some of it as
I don't
well.
know.
Oh, answer, yeah. Give
If I had to guess.
What do you got? Remember, he's invisible.
Well, I don't know. I would imagine that my best guess is probably something similar to what they do now, which is like they key out a background. So I would imagine that they painted his skin a certain color and then they could go and remove that later. But I guess they didn't have computers. So I don't know. That's my best guess.
That's not crazy far off.
Okay. They just actually made him invisible for the movie.
They did. The experiments worked.
That's it, folks. Thanks for listening to the Low Grade Research Podcast.
This has been the Low Grade Research Podcast.
It only took us 43 minutes to get there.
So, how did he disappear? So the man in charge of the special effects, his name was John P. Fulton.
Sounds like a revolutionary.
He was. And if you know anything about special effects and the history of it, he is the guy.
Okay.
He kind of,
Like the grandfather of special effects?
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. He's kind of the grandfather of special effects. He did the 10 Commandments, which won an Oscar for special effects.
Oh, like the movie?
The movie, yeah.
Oh.
No, he wrote the 10 Commandments.
Wow.
In 1954.
Wow.
No, the movie The 10 Commandments.
So recent.
Yeah, he did all the special effects for that, which won an Oscar. And yeah, so he's kind of the grandfather of special effects.
Yeah.
So in order to create the illusion that Claude Rains was invisible, they actually filmed a lot of his scenes in front of a wall that was covered in black velvet. And then they made a full bodysuit out of black velvet that Claude would wear.
No way.
Yeah. And then any of the clothes that he had to wear for a scene, he would just put on over it.
So then when they shine a light, it wouldn't shine into the black velvet, so it would make him look invisible.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. So
That's amazing.
Do all that, and then they just put that footage over footage of the actual scene.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So when he would take off his clothes, because he just had this velvet morph suit essentially underneath, it would look like he was invisible, that there was nothing there.
Wow, dude, can you imagine being the guy being that SFX guy, and you're like,
oh, right,
make this guy invisible. You're like, oh my gosh. How?
They're asking me to do the impossible.
I haven't slept in a week and a half. I'm not eating. My hair's gone. I can't do it.
And then once he does figure it out, he's got to sew for weeks.
Margaret!
I'm sewing.
I figured it out.
Get the needles.
Get the needles and the kids.
So they, made this cool backdrop and morph suit of velvet. The one kind of hiccup they had with it was that in the suit, it had to have eye holes so that Claude could see where he was going and act out his scenes, right? So on the actual rolls of film themselves, they had to go through and touch up where you could see his eye hole cutouts. And buckle up, dude. It's crazy.
So they just painted over it with black paint?
They did.
Oh, my gosh.
So John Fulton says...
the director didn't do that, by the way. That was a production assistant.
Hundreds of production assistants.
Who they whipped to an inch of their life if they messed up.
Oh, yeah. Buckle up.
Oh, boy.
So John Fulton, who's the special effects director, says, we photographed thousands of feet of film. Of film.
Oh, my gosh.
Through cameras. Thousands of feet of film. And many takes of the different scenes, and approximately 4,000 feet of film received individual handwork treatment to some degree, making approximately 63,000 frames, which were individually retouched.
Oh my gosh.
63,000 frames of film had to be, these were just the ones that were touched up. So they had to look through more than that to see if they could notice.
Oh, sure, they got to comb them.
You got to comb them and see if there's any flaws, any mistakes. This took forever.
I bet that reel of film is in a museum somewhere. It has to be.
Oh, it's got to be. It's got to be. Well, I mean, I'm sure the actual film for the film is still around somewhere, right? I'm sure Universal still keeps it.
Yeah, it's
preserved and stuff.
Either on display or it's in a vault somewhere that they're never going to release.
Freaking crazy.
That's
would
nuts.
take forever. So that was how they made him invisible. Other methods they used. There's a scene in the movie where Griffin is unwrapping the bandages on his head. Because in a lot of the other movies you may or may not have seen of the Invisible Man, he's usually bandaged up,
sure,
or wearing something so you can
that's
see
how you
his
can
form.
See him.
Exactly. Yeah. So in this one,
or he's just covered in sunblock in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Weirdly.
So, but all of them seem to have dark glasses because in this one he's bandaged himself up, and funny enough, he's got a toupee on.
Ooh.
So he's like,
that's real weird.
Bandaged up half of his face, puts on a toupee, bandages the rest. There's like hair poking out of some of the folds of his wrap. So it's like,
what?
Oh, he's still there. Because in this scene in the movie, the townspeople like come in.
What
an
insane amount of effort.
Oh my gosh, dude. So the police authorities come in to question him or arrest, and he kind of divulges like, yes, I have this insane power, like I'm invisible, and he starts unwrapping himself.
How did you know I hated my neighbor John?
He starts unwrapping himself. Midway through, there's hair. He grabs it and pulls it off and throws it on the floor, and then keeps unwrapping the rest of his head.
That's unhinged.
Yeah, a little bit.
Even for this movie, that's unhinged.
So for that scene, they actually created a really thin wired structure of a head, and then put it on top of put it on his head while he's wearing a suit.
Okay.
So in the scene, he's wearing like a button-up shirt, and then he starts unwrapping it. And in the scene, you can kind of see just the angles of his arms are up here, unwrapping it, versus like where they would actually be.
Right.
So they used a really thin
so
wire.
It's like a head on top of his head.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so he unwraps it, and it looks like he's just unwrapping into nothing. Wow. It's really cool. Really cool how they did it for then.
That's pretty amazing.
So that was the other kind of big one. And then for all the other little things like bottles being picked up or doors being opened and curtains shuttering and stuff, they used really thin wires to pull and things like that. So, and then the last scene that I kind of wanted to talk about is there's a scene at the end of the movie where he's invisible and he's hiding in a barn because the townspeople have realized that he's killed somebody.
Right.
Is that funny to you?
Just
that he's killed someone?
No, just like that he's hiding in a barn.
Real funny.
Like, you're invisible.
Just leave.
Why hide? Why hide anywhere? Just walk away.
Well, they're on to him now. And they track him because it is winter. So let me set the scene here. It's winter.
The snow.
He's left footprints behind.
I see.
Exactly. So they've cornered him to this barn. And in this scene, you see the doors open. They light the barn on fire to chase him out.
Sure.
Typical. What else are you going to do?
That doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. Yep, I've done that before. Continue.
So the doors open and you see footprints being made in the snow.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. It looks like really convincing.
Sure.
So I looked into how they did that.
Yeah.
And in order to create footprints... Is this funny to you?
Yeah, kind of. The emphasis you just put on that F on footprints.
Footprints?
I've never seen your lip fling out your mouth that way.
I'm trying to articulate myself better.
Boy, you did a good job.
My wife says I mumble.
Well, no, you're not doing that now. In fact, it's the opposite.
So, to make these footprints appear in the snow, they actually dug a small trench, roughly, I don't know, like a foot wide or so, and just a few inches deep. And then over that trench, they put a board, like a piece of plywood, basically. And then they cut out the foot holes, basically the shape of a foot, where he was going to be stepping.
Okay. And then they just dropped them in the right sequence?
And then they put those back in place. And under each one, they put a peg under each of the feet. And then covered it with the fake snow for it. And then as he's walking through, they just slowly pull each one. So that cutout that they put back in falls, and then the snow that's on top of it falls. And it looks like he stepped in the snow.
That is so cool.
So cool. So, like, ingenuitous.
Yeah, ingenuitous.
So much ingenuity.
Yep. And that's a shack.
So that's how they did that.
Wow.
So those are some of the cool special effects that they did for this movie.
I'm sold. When are we going to go see it?
Oh, let's see it this week.
I mean, I'm sure it's only like an hour long, right? Should we do a double feature? Creature from the Black Lagoon?
Yeah, dude. Okay. Well, now we get to talk about pop culture.
Ooh, hit me.
So this was the first one that they made, and they made like 3 or 4 sequels after.
Sure.
There's like...
That's a little surprising to me, actually.
Yeah, there's like... None of them were nearly as big as the first one, obviously.
Well, they never are.
No sequel is.
Yeah, never.
So there was like Revenge of the Invisible Man. There was one with
Avatar: Shape of Water.
Yes. There was one with a female lead. But those were like through the 40s, early 50s.
You didn't even bother to get the name of that one? It's just the one with the girl in it?
I guessed on the first one I mentioned. If you want me to go back and try and find the reboot, here they are, reboots. Well, there's the 2021 that was called The Invisible Man.
Right, pretty good. Yikes.
Crap, where'd it go?
Not so confident now, are we? Mitch is figuring out how to use computers, so it's going to be probably a few minutes. And
where did I put this?
Instead of being nice and editing this out later.
Found it.
Oh.
So there was the first one, Invisible Man, followed by The Invisible Man Returns.
Okay.
And then the third one, The Invisible Woman. So that's all it was.
Wow. Wow. So the problem
I guess I could have guessed that.
The problem doesn't even end with you, is what we're trying to say.
And then there was Invisible Agent.
Okay.
And then The Invisible Man's Revenge.
Yikes.
Yeah. And then there was a short documentary called Now You See Him, The Invisible Man Revealed.
Perfect.
Which they just kind of went over some of the process of filming the movie.
I bet you that documentary was about 100 times more interesting than all of those sequels put together.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how terrible Invisible Agent is.
Yeah, no way.
Ugh.
Terrible.
I'm never going to the movies again.
He's an agent and he kills.
So, some other pop culture references, I guess. So, The Invisible Man makes an appearance in a movie called The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh, I'm familiar.
You're familiar. The character's name in that movie is called Rodney Skinner.
Nice. It's not Krusty Lucas?
It's not Krusty Lucas. Who was Krusty Lucas? Was that from
captain
our
of
last
Yeah,
episode?
the captain of the boat that goes into the
Krusty
Black
Lucas.
Lagoon. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So because of...
I was just secretly hoping that there was a Krusty Lucas in every one we were going to do this month, but...
That'd be like Universal Studios Easter egg.
Yeah.
I feel like they would choose a way more subtle Easter egg.
They've got the Wilhelm scream and they've got Krusty Lucas.
In every Universal Studios movie, there's a character named Krusty Lucas.
And it's just the same dude dressed in the same outfit for everyone.
For everyone.
Oh.
That's
missed opportunity.
That's what the guy is in Jaws. Shark in the water.
You want to see me, Krusty Lucas?
Terrible.
I didn't mean it like that.
Oh. Anyway, they called him Rodney Skinner because due to copyright laws, they couldn't use the name Griffin for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen because that was not a Universal movie. So they had to come up with a whole different name for him. And instead of murdering people, he's just kind of a pervert in that
he's
movie.
A major pervert, yeah. Very grabby.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then in the other movie that you mentioned previously and that we said we'd come around and talk about is Hollow Man.
Kevin Bacon's
Kevin
Hollow
Bacon
Man?
much?
Great movie.
Honestly, it kind of is.
Yeah.
Like, especially for the time for movies of that era. Because what year was that? Like 2003, I want to say.
Gosh, it's got real strong early 2000s energy, doesn't it?
It really does. And
oh, dude, you're close. It's 2000.
2000. Okay, just straight up 2000. Wasn't the most amazing time for movies.
They had their own charm.
Sure.
Yeah, there were a few good ones.
It's clearly a movie made in the 2000s, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway, but yeah, honestly,
Hollow Man, Speed. There were a couple of good ones.
Pretty good. And it shows really well those same struggles of morality that we talked about earlier. Like,
also, I lied. Speed was 94, so
Hollow
Man's the only good movie from the year 2000.
If you had this power of invisibility, would you still maintain your morality? Would you start to go crazy? Would you, And I think Kevin Bacon shows us really well exactly what.
Well, I was going to say he falls off a cliff real quick.
He wastes no time.
Oh yeah,
at all.
he gets real pervy and grabby and murdery right out of the gate.
He was kind of already like.
I was going to say he's kind of a jerk.
He was kind of a horn dog before he became invisible, and he's like, well.
And kind of like a hotshot, like big-headed ego maniac, like rude guy.
Yes, exactly the type of personality you would not think a scientist would have.
Well, and exactly the type of personality where you're like, we're contemplating making one of the 7 people working on this invisible. Let's choose the most rude one. Let's choose the one who's already an HR violation. He's not going to do anything
He's
bad.
the only one with enough of an ego to risk his life.
Well, that's probably true. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why he becomes the Hollow Man.
He does.
I think Hollow Man, the title of Hollow Man is more a jab at his integrity than it is at him not being able to be seen.
Oh, I thought you meant that for the plot of the movie, it was a jab at the plot.
No, there's enough of a plot there. How can you completely butcher a plot of a movie that's already been made?
They do, like, in that movie, they basically make him, instead of bandages, they just give him like a silicone. They like pour hardening like liquid silicone over his face, and then it turns into like a rubber mask.
And you think cloth is hot? He's wearing a latex head cap.
I can only imagine.
Oh my gosh.
Terrible.
Just sweating.
Yep. I'm pretty sure he also goes from having a full head of hair when he's visible, and then when he puts on the silicone thing, he's bald.
You're totally right.
I just realized that.
He just puts that swim cap on, and
then he doesn't have any hair anymore.
He just swim caps his
Wouldn't
head.
it just be really lumpy on top of his head?
They make some of those swim caps really good.
Choice, but
they made their choices for that movie.
Yikes.
It's got Elizabeth's shoe in it, doesn't it?
Oh, just one?
Just one of her shoes, yes. Classic Elizabeth shoe joke.
And that's a shacked.
Wow. Got me on that one. All right, well, that's all I got about the Invisible Man.
Nice.
Any questions? Anything you didn't know?
Do you want to go watch Creature from the Black Lagoon, followed immediately by The Invisible Man, followed immediately by Hollow Man?
To the first two, absolutely yes. I've seen Hollow Man, and it's like worth a view. That's the best I can say for our beloved Kevin Bacon.
You also don't want to just be up till 3 a.m. tonight?
Yes.
Weird.
That too. My wife expects me home at some point tonight.
That's not going to happen. Well, sweet, man.
Well, that's the extent of the research I've done.
That might be one of the shortest episodes we've ever recorded.
It's possible. It's possible.
Yep.
Anyway, go watch this movie. It's still relevant today. I think in like 2008, it got an award for being like a culturally relevant film or like an influential film.
Sure. Even
80 years later.
And I mean, me and you are huge proponents of film, but
for sure.
Especially we love those old movies that have super, I'm going to say the same word you did now and screw it up. Well, I'm just going to say ingenious.
Very.
Special effects. Like you go, like, to the ideas that they had to make this movie work, fantastic. I'm super stoked to go watch that.
I love films that are forced to use their creativity to solve a problem versus, some of the CGI that we have today. You can tell. You can just tell.
Yeah. Right on. Well, I guess that's it, huh?
That's all we got. So go check us out on social media at Low Grade Research Pod. You can find us there. You can find excerpts and pictures from talking about the things we talked about in our episodes.
Yeah, and actually putting a visual to some of the stuff we talk about, like, I don't know, euthanasia roller coaster or sumo wrestling or dog whippers.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to get a chance to look at all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it'll be great.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to send us an email, please do. If you have an issue with the podcast, you want to suggest a new episode, or you don't like something about us personally, we'd love to hear that kind of stuff. You can send us an email at hello@otherbrothers.studio, and maybe we'll read it.
I'll read it.
I won't.
All right. We'll see you next time.